Dinner parties weren't usually my thing, but Maggie loved them. She loved the clinking of glasses, the scattered laughter, the curated chaos of small talk and shared desserts. It didn't even matter whose house it was or what the occasion might be. If there were people, if there were stories to tell, Maggie would be there with wine in one hand and a joke in the other. Me? I was just the guy holding the car keys and smiling in the photos. This particular night, it was our neighbor's place, Colin and Renee. They had a thing for string lights and charcuterie boards. It was one of those suburban get-togethers where the wine flows fast and the conversations stay carefully light. No politics, no religion, no real problems, just complaints about traffic and stories about dogs. Maggie slipped easily into it the way she always did, like water finding its level. We arrived 10 minutes late, which meant Maggie was perfectly on time. She wore her favorite green dress, the one with the slit on the side that made her legs look longer than they were, and a bright lipstick I hadn't seen in a while. I remember watching her in the entryway, how she seemed to catch the attention of every person in the room within seconds. She laughed with that wide, practiced smile, hand on my arm like a prop as she introduced us. "Alex hates these things," she said playfully, "but I promised him there would be cheese." Everyone laughed, including me, because that's what I was supposed to do. Dinner was already being served, grilled salmon with wild rice and something fancy-looking on the side. We sat across from Colin and next to a couple I didn't recognize. Maggie took the seat to my left, casually placing her purse on the table beside her wine glass. The room buzzed with conversation. Colin was going on about some lake trip they were planning in the fall, and Renee chimed in about paddle boards and sleeping bags. I wasn't fully listening. I was too focused on trying to stay present, to smile at the right moments and nod at the right points in the story. I was halfway through pouring my wine when I saw it. Her phone lit up. The screen faced upward, angled just slightly toward me. It was instinctual, my eyes just went there. Just a flicker of light, barely a second, but it was enough. Evan. Just that. A name. No last name. No context. No cute nickname or work tag. Just Evan. I paused for a beat, the bottle hovering over my glass. Who the hell was Evan? I ran through the names I knew, friends, coworkers, cousins. Nothing. Not once had Maggie mentioned an Evan. And we weren't at that stage in marriage where new people entered our lives without introduction. If someone new came into her orbit, especially someone texting her during a dinner party, I'd know. Wouldn't I? Before I could ask, Maggie reacted quickly, almost too quickly. She flipped the phone face down in one smooth motion, never breaking her stride in conversation. She didn't even glance at me. That kind of move wasn't born out of surprise, it was muscle memory. Then came the pivot. Okay, Maggie said, raising her voice just slightly to get the table's attention. You guys are gonna love this. Alex, honey, should I tell them about the laundry incident? My stomach tightened. I already knew what was coming. It was one of her favorite party tricks. Mock me just enough to be funny, never enough to be mean. At least not on the surface. Go ahead, I said flatly, already taking a sip of wine. She launched into it with flair, mimicking my confused detergent face, and adding extra drama to how I somehow managed to turn 3 white shirts blue. It was mostly true, except I'd already told her I didn't want her sharing that one again. That didn't matter to her. Not when the laughs were this easy to get. I swear, you guys, he had the manual out like he was defusing a bomb. This laundry, Alex. Not NASA. More laughter. Louder this time. Colin slapped the table. The unknown couple giggled like it was the best thing they'd heard all night. I smiled out of habit, not humor. Just enough to make it look like I was in on the joke. Not the butt of it. Maggie beamed. She loved this part. The way people leaned in, the way she could command a room. I watched her soak it in, like sunlight through stained glass. But my eyes kept drifting back to that phone. Sitting there, face down on the table. Silent now. Still. The rest of dinner blurred. Colin told a story about his disastrous camping trip. Renee showed off pictures of their new rescue dog. Someone passed a bottle of Pinot Noir I didn't recognize. Maggie kept the energy high, bouncing from person to person like a hostess, even though it wasn't her house. Every now and then, She'd touch my arm or nudge me under the table when someone made a joke. She smiled like nothing had happened, like she wasn't hiding something in plain sight, and I kept playing my part. I asked questions. I poured drinks. I chuckled when I was supposed to. But in the back of my mind, I couldn't stop thinking about that name, Evan. The name stuck like a splinter under the skin. I watched Maggie laugh at something Colin said. I studied her body language, the way she leaned forward, the way her phone stayed exactly where she left it, like a deliberate barrier. She didn't check it again, not once. And I knew that wasn't normal. Maggie checked her phone constantly. She lived on her group chats. But tonight, after that text, she acted like the thing didn't exist. It wasn't the silence of it that bothered me. It was the control. She wanted me to forget. She wanted the story to distract me. And in a way, it did. She was good at that. Flipping the script, shifting the spotlight, making herself look bright enough that no one noticed the shadows. The laughter died down eventually. Plates were cleared, dessert was passed around, some kind of almond tart. Maggie complimented Renee on the whipped cream, saying something about how Alex would ruin it if he ever tried. Another easy jab, another laugh. I said nothing. After a while, we stood to leave. Maggie kissed Renee's cheek and promised we'd host next time. Colin slapped me on the back and said I needed to bring my A game for the next barbecue. Maggie slipped her arm around mine as we walked to the car. The cool night air hit my face like a reset button, but it didn't help. The ride home was quiet. She hummed along to the radio, scrolling through her phone. The screen turned away from me. I kept my hands at 10 and 2, staring at the road, wondering when exactly I'd stopped feeling like her partner and started feeling like her stage prop. I didn't ask about Evan. Not yet. I didn't want to hear her lie. I didn't ask her about Evan that night. Couldn't. Not because I didn't want to know I did, but because I already knew. Or at least some part of me did. I just wasn't ready to hear it out loud, to let it become real. So instead, I spent the rest of the ride home in silence, watching headlights stretch and bend along the dark roads as Maggie scrolled her phone, lit softly in the corner of my eye. She was texting someone. I didn't have to look to know. When we got home, she breezed through the front door like nothing had happened, kicked off her heels at the entrance, and walked straight into the kitchen. "Want some tea?" she asked. "No, I'm good," I said. She nodded, opened the cabinet, and busied herself with mugs and honey. It was one of those small acts that used to mean comfort, domestic, familiar. Now it felt like performance. A way to fill space. A way to avoid talking. I went upstairs, showered, brushed my teeth, and got into bed. She joined me 10 minutes later, her phone still in hand, screen dimmed. I could hear her fingers tapping. Then silence. Then tapping again. I stared at the ceiling and listened to the pattern of her breath, trying to remember the last time she reached for me first. Eventually, she turned off the lamp and rolled away. That was when it started, the keeping track, the noticing, the mental log of everything that suddenly didn't fit. It wasn't just the text. There had been other things. Small things. Things I'd explained away because I didn't want to be that guy. The suspicious husband, the jealous type, the one who reads too far into a schedule change or a sudden haircut. But once you see something, you can't unsee it. And once doubt takes root, it spreads like mold. It was how she always kept her phone on silent now. Face down. Sometimes even airplane mode when we were together, with some excuse about wanting to be present. Which sounded noble until I noticed she only did it around me. It was the sudden surge in late nights at work. She'd always been career-driven, sure. But now the meetings were constant. The deadlines urgent. The office became this black hole she disappeared into. Always one more client call. One more pitch to revise. One more reason to not come home until 9:30. Once, I asked if I could meet her for lunch. I happened to be near her building, and I thought, why not? She hesitated. Said that day was bad. Said she had back-to-back meetings and barely had time to eat. I offered to just drop something off. She told me not to bother, that she'd already ordered in with her team. But she didn't know I was already parked outside when I called. And I watched from across the street as she stepped out of the building with someone I didn't recognize. Tall guy. dark jacket. They walked side by side for a while, talking, laughing. She touched his arm at one point, just a little graze. Not overly flirty, but not how she touched me anymore either. They didn't go far. Just around the block to a little cafe she used to say was too basic. They sat by the window. I sat in my car. And for 30 minutes, I watched them talk like nothing else in the world existed. That night, when she got home, I asked how her day was. Exhausting, she said. Didn't even have time for lunch. I nodded. That's asterisk CKs. She smiled faintly, kissed my cheek, and headed upstairs. It became a game after that. A quiet, one-sided scavenger hunt. I never snooped, not yet, but I started collecting clues. Conversations that didn't add up. Gaps in time she couldn't account for. Instagram stories from restaurants I'd never heard of, always showing the meal, never the company. Once, there was a wine glass across from hers in the reflection of a dinner plate. I zoomed in and stared at it for a long time. Still, I said nothing. It's not denial when you're aware. It's self-preservation. You learn to tolerate the ambiguity because clarity might mean collapse. And collapse? That's messy. That's lawyers and tears and dividing bookshelves. That's telling your parents. That's sleeping alone for real, not just emotionally. So I waited and watched. She grew colder. Not rude, never that. Maggie knew how to keep things civil. Polished. But the warmth faded. Weekends became solo projects. Brunch with friends. Spa days. Me time. If I asked if she wanted to go for a hike, she said she was too tired. If I offered to cook dinner, she told me not to stress myself. We were becoming roommates with history, people who used to be something. Then came the moment I couldn't ignore. A few weeks after the dinner party, we had a rare Saturday night together. Or at least it was supposed to be. She'd promised no plans. She even said she'd cook. But around 4:30, she got a call. I could hear her in the hallway. The voice she used, it was soft. Warmer than I'd heard in months. She laughed, then covered it up with a cough. When I walked out, she quickly turned away, lowering her voice. Okay, she said. Yeah, I'll see you soon. She hung up and walked into the kitchen. That was work, she said preemptively. I forgot I told Carla I'd help her with a proposal tonight. I just stared at her. On a Saturday? She's presenting Monday. It's a big deal. I nodded. So, dinner's off? She kissed my cheek. Rain check. I'll make it up to you. Promise. She left 15 minutes later. No laptop. No files. Just a quick outfit change and her best perfume. The one she only used on anniversaries. I stood at the window and watched her drive away. I didn't know where she was going, but I knew exactly what she was doing. That night I didn't cry. I didn't drink. I didn't even sit down. I just walked. For hours. Through neighborhoods that looked like ours. Quiet homes with lit windows and mailboxes with last names painted on them. I wondered how many people inside were pretending like me. How many husbands stared at front doors wondering who their wives were when they weren't home. When I came back, the house was dark. She hadn't returned yet. I showered, changed, and climbed into bed alone. Around 1 a.m., I heard the garage door. I pretended to be asleep. She tiptoed around like she was guilty. That was new. The next morning, I found a takeout bag in the trash. Thai food. 2 entrees. Hungry last night? I asked over coffee. She nodded. Yeah. I picked something up on the way back. For 2. She froze for half a second. No, I just ordered extra. Figured we could have leftovers. But there weren't any. I kept my face blank. Got it. Later that day, I opened my notes app and started writing things down. Not evidence. Just reminders. I needed to stop gaslighting myself. I needed a record. A list of the ways my marriage was changing beneath my feet. April 2nd, Thai food for 2. March 28th, wine glass in IG story. March 14th. Said she skipped lunch but I saw her at the cafe. March 1st. Evan text at dinner party. That last one stayed circled. Evan. I still hadn't said the name out loud. But it echoed. Every silence between us. Every unanswered question, every half-truth. It all came back to him. He was the ghost living between us now. The confirmation didn't come with shouting. It didn't come with lipstick on a collar or a hotel receipt tucked carelessly in a coat pocket. It came on a quiet Wednesday afternoon, like a whisper sliding under a door. I had left work early that day. Not by design. Just one of those rare occasions when things wrapped up faster than expected, and the thought of going home sounded better than pretending to look busy. The sun was out. The sky was that pale, cloudless blue that makes you think of vacations and second chances. I remember sitting in the parking lot of a grocery store for 10 minutes, trying to decide whether to buy dinner ingredients or just head home. In the end, I didn't do either. I just drove, passed our street once, then circled back. I didn't expect anything. That's what's strange. I wasn't trying to catch her. I didn't have some grand scheme. I was just tired. Tired of wondering. Tired of walking through our house like a stranger. Tired of the quiet that came between us. A kind of silence that didn't ask for permission. It just settled in. As I turned onto our street, I noticed a car parked in front of the house. Black, clean, a newer model. Not one I recognized. Maggie didn't have friends over during the day. Not without telling me. And certainly not while she was supposedly at work. I slowed down. Just a little. Enough to glance at the plate. Illinois tags. We live in Ohio. I passed the house. Drove another block. Parked. I walked back. Slow and steady. Heart doing this dull, rhythmic pound like it knew something before my mind did. I took the alley behind the house. Slipped through the gate quietly. I knew how the boards creaked and where to step without making noise. Years of weekend projects had made me and asterisk mately familiar with the flaws in our fence. The way the lock stuck on humid days. From the side yard, I could see the living room window. The curtains were open halfway. That's when I saw them. Maggie was sitting on the couch in that effortless way she had. Legs curled under her, barefoot, wearing that soft gray sweater she always reached for when she wanted to be comfortable. Her posture was relaxed. Not stiff. Not performative. Just easy. And sitting next to her was him. Evan, I assumed. Same guy from the cafe. I recognized the coat. They weren't touching in any obvious way. But they were close. Too close. Not quite shoulder to shoulder, but leaning. He was laughing, mouth open, head tilted slightly back. Maggie reached out and placed her hand gently on his arm. Just a small gesture. Familiar. Int asterisk mate. She used to touch me like that. Then she leaned in and kissed him. On the lips. Slow. Soft. No urgency. No guilt. Like it was normal. Like it wasn't the destruction of something that used to mean everything. I didn't move. Didn't breathe. It wasn't rage I felt. It wasn't even heartbreak. It was clarity. The kind that comes after months of fog. The kind that doesn't shout or collapse to its knees. It just sits with you. Quiet. Heavy. Unflinching. They broke apart slowly, still smiling. She said something I couldn't hear. He reached for her hand. I turned and walked away. I didn't run. I didn't confront. I didn't take photos or demand answers. Because I didn't need to anymore. This wasn't suspicion. This wasn't a hunch. This wasn't me connecting dots in my head and wondering if I was just being paranoid. This was it. Proof. The thing I thought I wanted. And yet, it didn't feel like victory. It felt like a funeral no one had bothered to attend. Like I was the only one mourning something everyone else had already moved on from. I walked for a long time. Past the school where Maggie used to talk about volunteering. Past the bookstore she never had time to visit anymore. Past the old bakery we used to go to on Sunday mornings before things got too busy. Everything was still where we left it. Except us. By the time I got home, really home, not the house, I had already made my decision. No confrontation. No yelling. No scenes. Just quiet. I opened our junk drawer and pulled out an envelope. Wrote my name on it. Slipped my wedding ring inside. Then I walked out to the mailbox, lifted the lid, and dropped it in. It made a small sound. Hollow. Final. I didn't leave a note. I didn't wait for her to come outside. I got in the car and drove to a small hotel on the edge of town. The kind of place people use when their lives don't fit neatly anymore. The guy at the desk didn't ask questions. Just handed me the key and told me where to find the ice machine. Room 214. One bed. One chair. One lamp with a slightly crooked shade. It was enough. I sat on the bed, phone in my hand, waiting, wondering. 10 minutes. No message. 30. Nothing. An hour later, a text came in. From Maggie. I found the ring. That was it. No follow-up. No call. No frantic messages. No, where are you? Or please come home. Just that. I found the ring. And somehow, that single sentence said more than anything else she could have written. She knew. And she also knew she had no defense. No explanation. Not one she believed herself. I set the phone down on the nightstand, next to the stiff hotel notepad and a pen that didn't work. I stared at the ceiling, listening to the low hum of the vending machine outside my door. The silence felt different now. Not cold. Not oppressive. Just quiet. And in that quiet, I started to feel something I hadn't in a long time. Not anger. Not grief. Relief. Because now there was nothing left to figure out. I stayed at the hotel longer than I meant to. One night turned into 3. It wasn't a plan, just inertia. I lived off takeout and vending machine snacks, didn't shave, didn't call anyone. The front desk clerk started greeting me with the kind of awkward politeness reserved for guests who are clearly not tourists but haven't yet become a problem. I checked my phone more often than I'd like to admit. Not because I wanted her to beg or plead or promise anything. I just wanted to know what story she would try to tell, how she'd frame it, whether she'd lie again or finally admit what I already saw with my own eyes. But there was nothing, just that one message. I found the ring. The silence after that was almost surreal. No missed calls, no frantic voicemails, no apologies typed out in midnight paragraphs. It was like she accepted it instantly, like the version of me that walked away was a person she had already said goodbye to months ago. I thought that might break me. Didn't. What broke me was how expected it felt. How natural it was for her to let go. There's this quiet, gutting realization that comes when you finally understand. Someone stopped choosing you a long time ago, and you were too loyal or too scared to notice. She didn't come to the hotel. Didn't ask where I was staying. She had keys to my entire life, and she didn't use them. Told me everything. And still, I didn't go back to the house. Not really. I returned once, during the 4th night, when I was sure she'd be asleep or gone. I parked down the street and walked in through the back gate, using the spare key we kept hidden under a loose patio tile. The kitchen was spotless. Too spotless. Like a staged home. Her coat was hung perfectly on the rack. Her shoes lined up just so. The only trace of disruption was the envelope I had left inside the mailbox. It was now sitting on the counter, my ring still tucked inside. She hadn't moved it, hadn't touched it, just brought it in like a parcel that didn't belong. I walked through the living room, then upstairs to our bedroom. She wasn't there. Maybe in the guest room. Maybe not home at all. I didn't check. The drawers were still full of her clothes. Her perfume sat on the dresser, untouched. My toothbrush was still damp. She hadn't thrown anything out, but everything felt vacant. I packed a single duffel bag. Just essentials. A few shirts, a pair of jeans, my laptop. I grabbed a book I'd been meaning to read for months. Nothing sentimental. No framed photos. No keepsakes. I didn't want nostalgia to follow me out the door like a ghost. Before I left, I stood in the doorway of the bedroom and looked around one last time. We'd made this space together. Chosen the lamps, argued about the paint color, laughed while assembling the bed frame with 2 small Allen wrenches. We'd made a life here, or at least the image of one. Now it was just a museum of a marriage. Downstairs, I paused at the kitchen table. On impulse, I took out a pen from the junk drawer and scribbled a note on the back of a receipt. I didn't sign it. I didn't say goodbye. I just wrote, I was already gone before I left. Then I placed it next to the envelope and walked out. This time I didn't look back. I rented a 1-bedroom apartment downtown. Sparse. Quiet. Walls painted in soft white, like a blank page. There was something freeing about starting from scratch. No shared closets. No passive-aggressive sticky notes on the fridge. No pretending. Just space. I bought a cheap coffee maker, a lamp, and a mattress that arrived rolled up in a box. Every item I unpacked felt like a small declaration of independence. I even started cooking again, badly but honestly. Pasta that stuck to the pot. Burnt toast. It didn't matter. It was mine. No more we. Just me. The silence at first was heavy. But over time it changed shape. Became breathable. Peaceful even. I got back into habits I'd forgotten I loved. Morning jogs with no destination. Reading until 2 a.m. Because no one needed the light off. I listened to the kind of music she used to tease me for, the moody, lyric-heavy stuff I'd once loved in college. I let myself remember who I'd been before I became someone else's support beam. One afternoon, while walking through a farmer's market, I ran into Becca, Maggie's younger sister. She spotted me first. Called my name like she wasn't sure I'd answer. Alex. I turned, surprised. She looked thinner than I remembered. Tired too, but still kind-eyed. We made awkward small talk. How are you? Have you been? I didn't mention the hotel. She didn't ask. After a pause, she said, "She's not doing great." I said nothing. "She doesn't talk about it?" Becca added. "But I hear her crying at night when I call. She said you left without warning." That made me laugh. Not cruelly, just softly, bitterly. "I didn't leave without warning," I said. "She just stopped listening." Becca didn't argue. "She misses you," she said eventually. I shrugged. "She misses the version of me who stayed quiet." Then I thanked her for saying hello and walked away with a carton of strawberries that ended up molding in my fridge. Weeks passed. Then a month. Then 2. I didn't block her number. I didn't need to. There was nothing left to say. Her silence was louder than anything she could have texted. But the memories came in waves. You can't just unspend years like pocket change. They show up in stupid ways, in the detergent aisle, in a song you forgot you both loved, in the way you still reach for the left side of the bed. Grief isn't loud. It's mundane. And yet I kept going. Not out of strength. Just forward motion. One foot, then the other. People at work asked where Maggie was. I told them we were taking space. Most didn't push. One day I got a letter. Handwritten. No return address. I recognized her handwriting instantly. Those sharp lowercase t's and the way she always dotted her i's with tiny circles. I opened it. It wasn't long. "Alex, I don't know how to say this the right way, so I won't try. I hurt you. I know I did. And I'll carry that with me. I don't expect forgiveness. I just needed you to know that I remember the version of us before everything cracked. I remember how you looked at me when you thought I was magic. I'm sorry I stopped earning it. I read it twice, then folded it back up and placed it in a drawer I rarely opened. Not because it meant anything, but because I wasn't ready to throw it away. She had been right about one thing. I did think she was magic once. But real magic doesn't vanish when someone stops watching. It endures. It adapts. It grows into something more solid than applause and borrowed stories. Maggie had always lived for the spotlight. But love doesn't need an audience. And I was tired of being the setup for someone else's punchline. Sometimes I replay the dinner party in my head. Not because it was special, but because it was the moment everything clicked into place. Not just the text from Evan. Not just the way Maggie flipped her phone, but the way she turned me into a punchline again. I sat there, surrounded by people who barely knew me, listening to the woman I married laugh at my expense like it was her favorite hobby. She called it just teasing, said it was part of our dynamic, said I was too sensitive. But the truth is, she didn't tease me. She mocked me, and I let her. For years. Started small as it always does. Little jabs in front of friends. "Alex can't cook to save his life. Don't let him near a map. He'll get us lost. He's so awkward around waiters." It's adorable. Harmless, right? First I laughed along. It was easier that way. Made people smile. Made her glow. But over time, the jokes got sharper. More specific. They stopped being cute and started feeling like inventory. Proof that she knew all my flaws and wasn't afraid to display them like trophies. The worst part wasn't that she said those things. It was that people believed her. Eventually, I did too. There's this thing that happens when you're constantly the target of light-hearted ridicule. You start shrinking. Not visibly, not all at once, but quietly, in ways you don't even notice until you look around and realize how small you've become. I stopped sharing ideas because I didn't want them laughed at. Stopped dancing because she'd called me stiff in front of friends. Stopped trying new recipes because she'd once told a dinner guest that I burn water. And every time I stayed silent, every time I played along, I gave her more ground to stand on. I don't think she meant to be cruel. Not consciously. Maggie was the kind of person who thought attention equaled affection. If people were laughing, that meant we were fine. If the story got a laugh, then what harm could it have done? She didn't realize that behind every laugh was a small cut. And after years of collecting them, I was full of tiny wounds no one could see. The day I left, I didn't just walk away from her cheating. I walked away from being invisible. One afternoon, about 6 weeks after I moved into the apartment, I got a call from my old friend Chris. He and I used to be close before I met Maggie. He was one of the people I let drift, not out of malice, just erosion. Little by little, the relationship got starved of attention until it went dry. "I heard," he said, not unkindly. "Yeah," I said, not exactly how I thought it would go. He didn't ask for details. He didn't need them. "I always thought she was intense," he said carefully. That was Chris speak for she's asterisk ked the air out of every room. We made plans to grab lunch. We talked about work, old friends, dumb college stories. It was like thawing out a part of me I hadn't touched in years. I laughed. A real laugh, the kind that doesn't check the room first. After that, we met up every couple of weeks. Sometimes with others. Sometimes just us. I was rebuilding without realizing it. One night, sitting on his porch, Chris said something that stuck with me. "You seem taller." I blinked. "What?" "I don't know. Like, you used to fold in on yourself. You don't do that anymore." It hit me harder than it should have. Because he was right. I used to shrink to make space for Maggie. Used to tuck in my opinions, lower my voice, wait for cues. Also, she could shine. And the thing was, she never asked me to do that. But she never stopped me either. A couple of weeks later, I ran into one of Maggie's friends at the grocery store. Lena. She used to come over with her husband for board game nights. She always brought wine we couldn't afford and had a laugh like a fire alarm. We made awkward small talk near the frozen peas. "I heard you moved out," she said, not making eye contact. "I did." She paused, then added, "She's not doing well." I didn't respond. "She says you just left. Like, no warning. Just gone." I forced a smile. "I was gone long before I packed a bag." Lena nodded slowly. "I figured." Before she left, she said, "For what it's worth, I miss the version of you who used to talk more." That sat with me, because I missed that version too. I started writing again. Not professionally. Not for anyone else. Just scribbles in a notebook. Thoughts I didn't know where to put. Some about Maggie. Some about me. Some about the strange, quiet middle space between grief and healing. I wrote about the way she stopped kissing me goodnight without noticing. About the sound of her laughter when it wasn't meant for me. About the difference between being alone and being lonely, and how I'd never felt more alone than when we were sitting side by side on the couch, both pretending not to see the space growing between us. There's a peculiar kind of heartbreak that comes from realizing someone didn't fall out of love with you. They drifted out. No storm. No explosion. Just a slow current pulling them elsewhere while you stared at the shoreline and told yourself the tide would return. One night, I came home to find a package at my door. No return address. Inside was a small wooden box and a single note. "This belonged to you more than it ever did to me." I opened the box. Inside was my wedding ring. Not the one I left in the mailbox. A second one. The original. The one I'd worn on our wedding day before it got resized. I had forgotten about it. Years ago, Maggie had it polished and put away after it stopped fitting. Said she'd keep it safe. And she had. Until now. I held it in my hand for a long time, Staring at the tiny scratch, I remembered getting on our honeymoon. We were hiking in Colorado, and I slipped on a rock, catching myself with both hands. She'd laughed and said, "That ring's tougher than you." I didn't cry, but I did sit down, hard, because there was something so painfully symbolic about it. The first ring was for the promise. The second one was for the habit. And now both were back in my hands. I didn't respond to the package. There was nothing left to say, but I kept the box. Not for sentiment, not for hope, but because it reminded me of who I was. Someone who meant his promises, even when the other person forgot hers. By the start of fall, I found a rhythm. Morning coffee, work, evening walks, music in the kitchen. I wasn't healed, not in the way people expect when they ask how you're doing now. But I was better, not because I had moved on from Maggie, but because I had finally moved back into myself.